Yawezekana. That's what we tell people. It is possible. No matter how poor you are, no matter how desperate you are, no matter if you're very sick, no matter if you have become even a prostitute by desperation or a criminal, you can change. It's possible to get into a better life.
Hello guys, welcome back to Wonder TV. My name is Maimuna Mikidadi. Welcome to this particular set, and today we have Mama Ingrid Monroe, the founder and manager of Jamii Bora Trust, a microfinance organization based in Nairobi. Mama Ingrid has helped a lot of street children and beggars through this particular organization. So, welcome Mama Ingrid.
Thank you.
So, who is Mama Ingrid Monroe?
She's 82 years old and not old yet. I still work full time. By 7 in the morning, you'll find me in my office every day. And I have dropped my grandchildren in school before I come here. I came to Kenya with my husband, our 2 teenage daughters, in 1985. And we were supposed to be here for 2.5 years. I was in charge of the International Year of Shelter for the Homeless, which was based in UN Habitat and covered the whole world. We didn't leave, we are still here, because the African countries woke up during that time. Before that, they were in very bad denial. They didn't have any urban problems. If you ask the president, he said he didn't have any slums. In Nairobi, our people are rural, but during this preparatory work and the year itself, the African countries woke up and decided we'd better do something, otherwise we'll have our own Calcutta cities and Bombay cities in Africa also. So they decided to start African Housing Fund. It was 22 countries who started, and they asked me to stay and be in charge of that. I said, I think you need an African to be the head of a Pan-African intergovernmental organization, and they had never had a woman either, so I was wrong for 2 reasons, you see. But the minister said, no, if we have decided we want Mrs. Monroe, we want Mrs. Monroe, and we want to do this now. We want something to happen. So we stayed, and I was running that organization for 2 consecutive 5-year periods. But what specifically happened in Kenya was a small street kid, 6-year-old street kid, had been run over by a bus. And that happens a lot in the streets. You know, the small and cute ones, they get money from well-wishers. The big boys, everybody is afraid of. But so this small boy had got some money, and a big boy was snatching it from him. And he was running, trying to catch up with his money, and I was knocked down by a matatu. And there was a Catholic father in St. Teresa's Church in Matar, Islam, who called me, because he knew my dad had been a missionary and a medical doctor and had headed a mission hospital in Africa. He was still alive. I asked Dad what we could do to save the leg of this little boy, and we saved his leg, and that was the beginning of a long love story, which ended up in my husband and I legally adopting the little boy to be our real son. And we later found his 2 younger brothers and adopted them also. So through this little boy, who was so kind, you see, he wanted us to help all his friends in the streets. So, you know, having come here as a diplomat, the only school we knew was the International School of Kenya. That's where my daughters were. So we took the little boy from the streets to the International School of Kenya. And he was so clever. He was so clever. He adapted so fast and that. But the most amazing thing about this little boy was that he didn't forget where he came from. And he wanted us to help all his friends in the streets. Wherever we went, he said, "Mom, stop, stop. There is a friend here. There is a poor person here. We have to do something." So in Kenya, we started a project with street beggars also, the very, very poor, not just the people who were trying to grow up in the slums and could now afford housing. And we convinced the mamas who got housing loans from us to rent out one room to a street family and encourage them and inspire them and convince them that they can also grow. And that's how our project with the poor, very, very, very poor started. And these women in the streets are amazing. To survive in the streets with kids, you have to be very clever. The very shy ones, they stay in the slums and they stay on the streets and they don't earn anything. But the clever ones, they try to climb and they try to save their kids. So I learned so much from them, and we had a very large program in Kenya with the very poor. When I finished my job in African Housing Fund in 1999, after 10 years. And that's when the mamas said to me, "Mom, you can't abandon us now. What's going to happen to us?" So we started a project in Kenya. I thought it would be a small project, you know. I had thought I had retired in 1999. But we started a small project, and it grew like a bushfire, you see. Grow and grow and grow and grow. And they got small loans. They started small businesses. Almost everyone starts by selling sukuma wiki. That's the only thing they've been able to afford to buy, you see, and they knew what the costs are, how to sell, and they sit on the roadside. They don't need a shop or anything. They sit on the roadside and they sell. And then they started growing, you see, and came up with other ideas. There's nobody selling this here. I could probably try that, you know. And so through the intelligence, the hard work, the amazing skills that every human being has, there is no human being that doesn't have at least one skill, isn't it? Some have many skills, but everybody has at least one skill. And even if you're handicapped and you can't walk very well, you can have a very good head, or somebody has another handicap. And you see, the very desperate, they never give up, because they have to make sure, the mamas have to make sure that the kids stay alive. So in desperation, some of them finally even get into prostitution if there's nothing else way of surviving. No woman wants to be a prostitute. I've never come across one who wants that, but desperation can sometimes bring you there. But when they get a chance now to earn money in another way, they can get out of that life, you see. And some boys get into crime, try to steal when they're very desperate. We get them out of crime into a better life.
So, the birth of Jamii Bora. Tell me about the birth of Jamii Bora Trust.
The back.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the beginning of it, you see. So when we started now after African Housing Fund, we started just with some of the mothers I knew well, but after a few months it was clear we had to register it officially, you see. So we decided to form a charitable trust, and we decided to call it Jamii Bora, to tell the world, don't look down at them because they're poor. They're also good families, very good families, and hardworking. So that's how the name Jamii Bora came out. And it grew and grew. We were started with microfinance. Then the first year, at the end of the first year, when we noticed some people were not paying their loans, we had to find out why, because if people don't pay back their loans, you can't continue. And we visited, we didn't go like many organizations go and take their chairs or whatever they have in their little place. We went there and talked to them. My staff was around talking to all of them. And the results of that was amazing, you see. 92%, almost 100% had the same problem. They had a patient in hospital. There's no mother in the world who says, I have to take my kid to hospital or she will die. And she says, no, I can't do that because I have to pay my microfinance loan. Could you think of any mother thinking that way? She would try to save her kid first, isn't it? And that's why they were not paying their loans, you see. So we decided to do something about that. Instead of fighting them and taking their things, we started our own health insurance for the poor. And it's still going on. We work with the mission hospitals, and we have saved so many lives.
In this particular organization, you have the different programs in it. And one of them is the housing program and the Levuka, the addiction program. Why do you think it's important?
You see, as I'm explaining, to get out of poverty, you need many things. If you only help people with one thing, that when a problem happens on the other side of their life, they slip back, you see. So I've just explained how the health insurance started because we found that people needed help. And since I'm a daughter of a missionary who was the head of a mission hospital, my dad was a medical doctor, it was natural for me to go to the mission hospitals and ask, can we work with you? And that's what we have done. So the Levuka, as you mentioned, is where we help people with alcohol or drug addiction to recover. And that was another thing we found a bit later. There were still some people who were not able to pay. And when we went more into depth, why, we found they had a suffering alcoholic in the family. And that, if that is the dad in the family, you can imagine, when the mama comes home with her little money, and this was before M-Pesa, you see, she came with her money and she would put it, hide it in her bras and everywhere. But if the husband was a suffering alcoholic, he would just beat her up until he got the money, because he was desperate for the money. And if it was a son or a daughter, it was the same problem. So again, we found some people who were not paying their loans, and when we went into depth, we found out these problems, you see. So we took some people to rehabilitation center, and we met Tom Thiongo, who was a teacher in one of those centers. And he got so fascinated by what we were doing, and we were fascinated about how he was doing his work. So we joined hands. And we have been running our own rehabilitation center since 2010, in July 2010. And last year, I'm proud to tell you that the government agency, NACADA, who supervises this, I was told, they said that we were the best center in the whole country last year. So it's possible. We have learned that everything is possible, and you never give up. You never, ever, ever give up. Every problem we meet, we find a solution.
Jamii Bora Trust has been a very successful organization. What do you think is the biggest reason for its success?
Well, in my view, it's because it is the people themselves who are running it. You see, when you get a donor coming to discuss whether they should help you or not, and they start asking questions, what kind of education do your staff have? And I was proudly telling them they have all grown out of extreme poverty. They know it's possible because they've done it themselves, and they are experts of explaining to others that they can make it. So some of them, so-called experts that came, they thought I was a bit stupid. I didn't understand that you need a university degree and that. But you take a university student and you employ a good one, they may not even dare to walk through the slums, you see. But the people who have grown up in a slum are not afraid. They know, and they know how to talk to people, and they know what the problem is. So one day there was an extra cocky one who came to me, and I heard myself saying, "Oh, thank you for asking that question, because I'm so proud because all my staff have a doctorate degree." And I said, "What? All of them? In what subjects?" "All in the same subject," I said. "What subject is that?" "The subject is called poverty. And we are the only university in this country where people can graduate in a subject called poverty." And they know it is possible, you see. Yahweh Sekana, that's what we tell people. It is possible. No matter how poor you are, no matter how desperate you are, no matter if you're very sick, no matter if you have become even a prostitute by desperation or a criminal, you can change. It's possible to get into a better life.
So, in as much as most organizations tend to employ people who are more knowledgeable, you employ people you've helped out of poverty.
Well, I employ those who are the most knowledgeable about poverty. What it is like to be poor. How do you suffer? How do you survive? And who are the only ones who know that it's possible. It's really possible to climb out of that poverty with the help of microfinance, with the help of health insurance, with the help of Levuka if that is needed, with the help of all the other programs we have. It is possible. And you see, when you meet somebody very poor, they will always start saying, "It's not possible, I'm too poor. Please help me, give me." And they ask for handouts, you see. Now, you can get handouts for a time. So if you're lucky, you meet somebody who comes and gives you handouts all the time for maybe several years. But then it stops. And they're slipping back to being just as poor, you see. The only way to get out of poverty is to climb yourself, and it is possible.
What do you think is the difference between your microfinance organization and other microfinance organizations?
I think the difference is that we focus on the poor, and the others usually say, yes, we focus on those who don't have much money because they haven't started a business yet, but they're not working with the really poor, the very poor. And we know what we are doing because our people all our staff, as I told you, have a doctorate degree in a subject called poverty. And we are the only university who give out that degree. And in my country, I can tell you that I come from a country called Sweden. It's in the very north of Europe. It's very cold in the winter, snow and ice, and if you don't have a house to live in, you don't survive. But in 1850, Sweden was the poorest country in Europe, and people died, from poverty. But then the American dream turned up. You see, North America was just empty prairies, but lots of land. And some poor people from Europe had come there and said, "Oh, there's so much land here. We can have a farm. We can come." And then they started traveling, more and more people. By 1900, in the beginning of the 1900s, my country, 1 million out of 4 million had emigrated to North America. And that's when the rich became nervous all over Europe. You see, where are the workers? The workers are disappearing. So they didn't even have the right to vote in those days. Only the nobility and property owners had the right to vote. Now the leaders decided to give every man the right to vote. I think it was 1908. And in 1916, all women got the right to vote also. And that's when the country changed. You see, in my country, we didn't have anything, what I call the tribal nonsense here. You know, rich people can say, if you're from this side of the country, you vote here. If you're from this side of the country, you vote here. Or if you're a Muslim, you think this way. If you're a Christian, you think this way. They came together. And when I was a young civil servant, I graduated as an architect in 1964. And we still had a few very old ministers, the Minister of Finance, my own Minister of Housing, from that generation, you see. And I learned so much from them. I'm so grateful that I had a chance to learn from them. And that's what we're using here. And the main message we have, it is possible. Everybody can get out of poverty. And we, you know, sometimes you meet somebody, a woman who's only this size, you know, a dwarf, like a small kid. And even getting up on the seat, you have to jump up. But clever, you know, clever. And so I kept telling I told one of them the other day, she's so bright, you know, and she lives in Kapute in Utah. So I said, I have seen it now. God put so much in your head that he didn't need to put too much in your body. So what you didn't get in the height of your body, you have extra in your head. And that's what you find. Everybody, sometimes people think they're handicapped when they're not handicapped. They're handicapped on one aspect. Like I can tell you about Dedan Iriri. He was a street kid, among the ones I got to know together with little Wathaka. And Dedan only had one leg. He had been, you know, when it's a poor person, they come to Kenyatta Hospital, they will not do a very expensive operation. And the cheapest operation is to cut the whole leg if it has been hurt, you see. So Dedan only had one leg. And therefore he was a better beggar than the other kids, you know. So it was very tempting for him to sleep back in the streets when we tried to train him, because everybody felt sorry for him, having only one leg. And we kept saying, Dedan, when you become bigger, nobody's going to feel sorry for you. But one day we had just come into this building in industrial area in 2005. Dedan Iriri turned up on a bicycle with one leg. And he had learned that he could put a strap on top of his foot, the only foot he had. So when he was pushing down, like you do with this leg, it was okay. When he should have used the other leg, he was lifting instead, you see. Then Dedan became a part of the Paralympic team from Kenya. Dedan has been to Europe, he's been to North America, he's been to Asia. He's one of the top bicyclists. With his one leg, he's married, he has several children, and he's running a very good shop. He's selling this kind of bags that you buy for children to carry their books and that when they go to school. And he sells very good ones. So he's one of our many top stories, you see, which shows that nothing is impossible. Everything is possible.
In 2008, post-election violence, there's a particular interview you did, and you said at that point you had to become a beggar. You had to call people to help, because at that particular point, most of your members had lost like everything. How was that?
In 2008,
Yes.
in the post-election violence, that was horrible. It was a horrible time. And you see, the rich are playing games with each other, but they use the poor to fight. So, for instance, the whole of, our members lost everything. It was terrible. Now I managed to raise donor funds around the world. We had a disaster insurance also, you see, and they were part of our disaster insurance. But what funds I managed to raise, we put in that insurance now, so they all got help. And they climbed. And in Kibera, for instance, Toy Market, the whole market was pulled down overnight. Some gangsters had been hired, or I don't know, come up with the idea themselves, and they burnt down the whole market. And at the end of January, I managed to get some funds from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to rebuild that market. And there was one market in Kisumu also that had been pulled down in the same way. And then we redesigned it so we could fit in more shops. And we rebuilt it. When I was going to start building, my branch manager in Kibera, Andrew Otieno, he said to me, "Mom, we'd better find those hooligans who pulled down the market, because otherwise they would come and pull it down again." You remember it took till May, wasn't it, before Kofi Annan came and a coalition government came up and the fighting stopped. But so Andrew found the hooligans, and they were so upset with him that he wasn't afraid of them, you see. They threatened him, really threatened him. But he came back every day, and at the end of the first week he had been talking to them, we had just come into this big building, and the whole downstairs, all the way up to there, it was empty, and we became the center of food aid. All food aid that came to Nairobi was stored here. And we were the ones distributing in the slums because we were not afraid. You see, and everyone who worked in any of the slums were from that slum themselves. They knew it. They knew everybody. So we distributed food, and now when Andrew said to these hooligans, "By the way, we have some food aid that we can share with you if you help us to rebuild the market." They changed completely. You see, they had not been gangsters for 10 years because they thought that was a good job, because of desperation. And I remember so well, and they're still doing very well. And they have their own shops in the market also. Because I redesigned the market so we fitted in a bit more shops. And one of them is a top leader of the leadership in the market. He's in charge of security. And another one has a good business. So it's possible. Everybody has good talents. If you use them, they can go far. And the country will be better also.
Today you can work in any slum in Nairobi without fear of your security. They know you very well.
Well, in most parts, yeah. I know I'm not afraid. You know, when I was still working in the UN, when we started this International Year of Shelter, I was instructed that I was not allowed to go to the slums. How could I work with helping people to get out of poverty if I didn't know them, if I didn't understand them, if we didn't work with them? So I figured out that, you know, in the UN they don't work on Saturdays. So I stopped working on Saturdays, and Saturdays and Sundays I was with, there was a Catholic father in St. Teresa's Church in Mathare Valley, Father Gror, who took me around and had these people showing me everything. So I was just out in the slums. And what I figured out when I was traveling, now it's the same thing in India or whichever country I was in, I figured out that if I booked my planes, so when I had to change the plane in one place, I was likely to lose. I was likely to miss the next plane because there was too little time. Then I would have one day, you see, to go out. And I would meet then the people that I had talked to in different international meetings. And they took me around in the slums, and we met. And so everything we have been doing it on the basis of the talents and the skills and the brilliant ideas of the poor themselves. And we don't expect them to stay poor and wait for handouts. We expect them to climb, you see.
Thank you very much, Mama Ingrid. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your story. So, guys, that has been Mama Ingrid. Hope you've been inspired with her journey of Do not block the poor and never give up. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Till next time, thank you for watching.